Okay, so I'm going to show you how to take this apart. Toothpicks don't scratch. Just gotta be careful it doesn't split on you. You want to use like magazines because they make a really good workbench because they absorb impact. You can see how it's splitting, but it's no big deal because pin's coming out. So we can drive it out. Careful when you put your fingers around it. So if the hammer slips, it's not really gonna hurt you much. It's a really light hammer, so okay. Come on, baby. Come on. Ha! Almost there. You know what? Gotta relieve the tension. There we go. That's what happens when you don't put the hammer down. It's been a little while been a while since I've done this. There we go. Easy peasy. There we go. So that's off. And then you want to cock this guy back. Turn this right here. Come on a little bit, boy. There's a spot right here. When you get it just right, the detent comes out, detent plunger. And then you can move your safety. That. And then comes out that way. If you have the circular grind on there, it comes out real easy. Gets right over that knuckle on the frame tang. Right there. Most guns don't have that. Mine do. Because mine are put together by me. They work better than most people's. And I'm not trying to be arrogant about it. Just saw what I did. Thing comes out real easy. Alright, so get rid of all this stuff here. And then I gotta take that plunger out right there. And then push on the side. Taking these little guys out right here. Hammer comes out. Come on, hammer. And there we go. And there's the sear. So what I'm doing is pushing on the domes of the pins to elevate them a little bit, and I snag them with my fingernail. There we go. And then the small parts come out right here. And you got sear. Sear. You got your disconnector. This is a cylinder slide. It's got like a little T design on it, which is, I guess it's supposed to help it so it doesn't clog, but I'm not real crazy about it, but it came in a kit, so I thought I'd use it. Kind of want your disconnector to look like that. It's got to have a bevel right here, because when you slam your magazine in, it could actually catch the disconnector and send the hammer down, resulting in an unintentional discharge, which is really dangerous. Okay, so now, got to get that out there. So, I've got a screwdriver tip. Show you right here. If I can get it out. It's just a bit tip, you know, from one of those hardware store screwdrivers, and I just ground the sides down, both sides, to be able to fit inside the screw slot right here. I'll put her in there. And you gotta lift the slide release up a little bit. Give her a little twist. That it comes out. There it is. This was a cast part, and the mold line was actually hitting the magazine, leaving like a little shiny spot, so I had to relieve it. There's a lot of parts on these 1911s that are cast and not machined, and you run into that. So, all right, there's the trigger right there. All right, so which brings us to, all right, let me sit down here for a second. Our discussion of the 1911 trigger. We're going to mainly focus on the track that the trigger rides. You know, these little corners right here. Let's see if we can get a good view. You might see that one better. These guys here, this rectangular cut, you want to like knock the corners off so that the trigger does not bite into it, you know, when you're squeezing round off and get erratic trigger pull. It'll feel like clicking, even though the trigger naturally is kind of loose. So you just go ahead and, you know, you file them with an abrasive file, not removing material from the top, just knocking the corners off, you know, so your trigger can slide smoothly like that. And, you know, it could be really smooth. There's no clicking or binding. And you could also see how this trigger is slightly reduced right here. And it's rounded on the top here. So it doesn't catch in the slot. And what we're seeing is positive engagement here. Oh, come on, camera, don't let me down. Okay, I guess this is where it's at. Right here, that's a positive engagement with the grip safety. And I could tell we have enough engagement. It seems like it's almost half the back. The back strap area here of the stirrup. Now what we have here is the up and down adhesive wear of the disconnector. This little part right here. It rides, you know. So removing some material down here on a piece of sandpaper, or maybe you want to use a stone, will help you make your sear spring, this guy here, last a lot longer, because a lot of times it can kiss the back of the leaf spring, sear spring. And you know, you can see what you're working with when there's an established wear pattern. So you don't want to do this when you have a brand new gun and there's no mileage on it. Doesn't have a story to tell you. I wouldn't trust it. I want to see wear patterns. And then you also want to, I got a little piece of toothpick I was using to pull the pins out with, or tap them out so it doesn't scratch the finish. But anyway, this area here, it'll cut into the trigger shoe, so you want to knock the sharp corner off there, there, and there. And then you want to use your trigger track stone, available from Brunel's. You just follow the track in there, until all the burrs are nice and smooth. You know, they're laying flat as best as you can. You know, don't get too crazy on that stuff because you don't want to make the slot bigger. You just want to get all the discrepancies out of there so that the trigger can fly back and forth. You know, having like, you know, some kind of scratches that don't look like a mirror shine or whatever. That's not what you don't want to like try to get all that out, because what ends up happening is you get a really loose trigger and it starts to catch and bind on things. So you just want to hone them, if you will, and knock off all the burrs and the cruddy manufacturing process of making that slot without removing too much material, if at all possible. And all right, so now you got to find out where the bearing surface is on the trigger shoe. I had a shiny spot or a dull spot right about there. You can tell the window was biting right here. And so I was stoning it this way, creating a slight radial use on here. It's like a bevel, only it's roundish. Radial use, that's what they used to call it. I don't know what they call it now, if I'm even saying it right, but that's what I was taught, and that's what I'm going with. So when you shoot your gun, especially nowadays, everybody wants to shoot a gun with a real high grip. Your hand's like way up here, so your trigger finger's way down here. So that's a pressure point. And then, you know, so you want to make that bearing surface as smooth as possible so that the trigger can move back and forth and reset correctly and not bind or click. And so I don't like having set screws because the true 1911 was never designed to have that stuff. And so what we have here is the mag release. Slide that guy in there. And it keeps the trigger from falling out of the frame. So you have to remove this. But you can see the way that the bearing surface is on the bottom of the shoe. And you got a little wiggle here. It's a smooth kind of wiggle. It's healthy. But you can see how this is kind of radially used on the bottom. So when you pull the trigger like that, it doesn't want to shovel into the frame window. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Okay, so, all right, so anyway, so when they're extended like this one is, what you see here, that little back of the trigger shoe can bend. You know, if you're really, you know, gripping it, and you forget like to get your hand up there on the safety to deactivate it, and you're just doing that, you can bend this trigger shoe in the window. So that's why it's important to have this kind of radial used. So, you know, it'll still function if and when you need it in the heat of the moment. Because, you know, when people freak out, they do things to their guns that really aren't that healthy. You're not supposed to love your gun. It's supposed to go bang when you pull the trigger. So having extended ones with set screws to make your finger feel more comfortable in a more neutral position is actually incredibly unhealthy for the longevity of a trigger and can create problems. And you know, when you're heavy on the trigger pull, you know, you get a lot of nose dip. So these guys were not designed to have extended triggers. They were designed to have a convulsive grip trigger with a neutral grip. Okay, here's one. Oh, isn't she beautiful? Look at that. Oh, wow, that's so awesome. Yeah, this is another one I built. By I built, I mean I built this thing. I fit the slide to the frame and everything. This is better than anything you can buy. I'm pretty confident to say. You know, so anyway, without getting into all that arrogance, kind of proud of my work. But this is a combat trigger. This is a convulsive grip trigger. This is what it's supposed to be. So when you would grab your gun, you just focus on squeezing the lemon, and that's what they kind of called it back in the day, and it go boom, you know. So you didn't have a trigger out to here that was long. You pull it, and you end up with nose dip, you know. So they tried to idiot-proof this design for combat, and you know the triggers are supposed to be little like that. You might also notice that it is beveled, you know, so it's serrated, you know, in case you want to put your finger on there, pull it that way instead of the convulsive grip technique where you're just like but the idea is to squeeze it and not like the trigger, so you're freaking out, the bad guy's coming, bad guy go down, you know, with like no thought whatsoever, just impulse shooting. It kind of worked well back in the day. They were hitting targets at 50, was it 50 feet? No, not 50 feet, 50 yards. Man-sized silhouettes with the Millispec 1911, which is pretty impressive. I don't know too many people that could do that, even like with handguns nowadays. You know, 25 yards is pretty far. A lot of people don't make it when they shoot. A lot of the cops and military guys do, and some security ops people, but it's like twice the distance that handguns are usually, you know, judged by. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that that's what they went with back then. So having extended triggers, that's kind of like a modern design on these things, and it does make it more comfortable to shoot, because then, you know, you could have your finger out more if you're trying to focus on your trigger pull. And so I don't like extended triggers because they can bend and create really bad situations for you. So you definitely want to use your Harbor Freight file, you know, and remove the sharpness from the inside of the trigger, as these tend to, when you go with a high hold, your finger tends to hit low on the pad, and it twists the stirrup, and it tends to bind on the magazine. So, you know, right here, you don't want to thin it, but you do want to knock the corners off on both sides. So when you're torquing on the trigger, either this way or that way, you know, these two guys here be free and clear of the magazine, and that will give you a better than factory trigger. To get this mirror shine here, you can just use McGuire's rubbing compound in a microfiber cloth and drag it across it a bunch of times. Or you can use flits. It's up to you if you like to use flits. You don't really have to. And that's pretty much where we're at with this. So you want things to be deburred and smooth, and to ride easy on one another and not hang up. And you definitely want to have the right safety engagement in this area here, and you'll be a lot happier shooting your gun. And once you do that and you pick up somebody else's gun, you're going to be incredibly aware of how terrible their high dollar 1911 trigger is. You know, because you know better. And some of these guys have little extensions where you can bend out, you know, to, you know, bend out this way and that way to make it longer so that the trigger doesn't move completely forward. So the idea is it holds the trigger back a little bit so you can get closer to the disconnector in the sear to reduce your trigger pull. That's a very, very bad idea. but a lot of target shooters and competition guys love it because, oh yeah, I got a short reset, right? Well, you might end up not having a reset because this is not a coil spring. The sear spring is a leaf spring, and these guys tend to be lazy. So if you try to get your close tolerances so that this little guy moves just a little bit, like bang, you know, a little bit of particulate there when the spring takes its set and it gets lazy and it has to move, it may not reset correctly, and you may have a problem. And it'll also affect your ability to, you know, follow up shooting. Instead of like trying to shorten the distance of your trigger, you know, you should actually increase the pressure on your sear spring. It makes more sense. And the longer travel clears the slot out. You know, if it's like really short and you get a little piece of gunk in there or what have you, you can jam up the trigger on these things. You know, I'm sure there's people out there that tell me I'm wrong and, oh, this is the way it's been. I've been doing this for years, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because it's a stupid thing to do. So it's up to you if you decide to want to do it. But I'm not going to do it because I want my guns to work. I want them to work all the time, not just some of the times, you know. So that's all there is to this. So I hope you understand all that. And if you got any questions about it, you just go ahead and toss it in the comments. Try to get back to you as soon as I can to answer those. But you don't need to go out and buy fancy parts. And, you know, if you don't like the color of your trigger because it's like some kind of bare naked aluminum that's oxidized and you want it black, you can just get yourself a can of Rust-Oleum. I'm not kidding. They do this stuff in the Army. Army guy taught me this. You get a can of Rust-Oleum and, you know, you clean up your trigger shoe as best you can with acetone. And then you spray paint it, and then you cook it in the oven at 220 degrees for 40 minutes, and it'll be just as good as this Duracoat finish that you're seeing here. This was a spray-on Duracoat. It was really expensive. It was like, I think it was like pretty close to $50 for a can. But you could get something like it for as little as $7 from your local hardware store. So that's up to you. From here on out, I am not going to be buying any more Duracoat. All right, y'all have a good day. If you like and subscribe, you won't miss another video. I'll catch you later.